Ranked among the top public universities in the U.S., the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business provides an outstanding MBA experience tailored to your interests and leadership development. Whether switching careers, enhancing a career, or starting a business, an MBA from Fisher provides tomorrow's leaders with the knowledge and skills to succeed today. Visit fisher.osu.edu to learn more about Fisher's personalized MBA program and competitive scholarship opportunities.
Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
What's up, guys? It's Darren. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. I can't believe it's already September. Schools are traveling all around the world right now to recruit, and I'm sure many of you have your heads down, buried in your applications, getting those ready. I wanted to do an episode on how to interact with MBA admissions officers at events, whether that's an MBA tour or an information session or a one-on-one personal consultation. In fact, I got this question from a loyal listener and a member of the Admissions Edge. She said, "Hi, Darren. One topic that I'm sure folks are confused about is networking with and getting to know admissions committees. I've heard many times that distinguishing yourself from other applicants by reaching out to the admissions team, getting to know them and current students is a very advantageous thing. I've gone to a number of admissions events here in Austin, Texas, and emailed with a few on some application questions, but I still don't know how to approach this and don't think I've made a memorable impression. I still feel kind of like one of the hundreds of applicants rather than, oh, that's such and such. Yes, I know him." Based on your team in admissions and consulting, is there a best way to approach and get to know admissions teams at target schools? So this is a great question, and something I'm sure many applicants might be somewhat nervous about. You want to make a good impression with these gatekeepers. How do you do that without coming across as desperate or nervous or awkward or too formal or too informal, right? How do you strike the right tone, and what types of questions do you ask? So that's what this episode is going to cover. I'm going to draw heavily on my own experience as an admissions director traveling all around the world at these sort of events and what I noticed and what type of applicants really stood out to me. I'm also going to draw on my experience going to many of these events as third-party observer and seeing which students really made an impression with the schools that were there at these events. Just a quick note before we jump into this. Do know that at touchmba.com, you can get free school selection help. You can also get free monthly email updates. So let's say you're living in Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, or you're living in Singapore or Bangkok or Austin, Texas. You can find your city or country and we'll send you free monthly recruiting event notices of all the top 50 programs coming to your city or your country. So you can sign up for that at touchmba.com/events. Let's just jump straight into this episode about how to interact with MBA admissions officers at events, how to make a great first impression or second impression. First, I think you need to divide schools into two types. The top ranked schools who have no problem getting applications, and everyone else. So for the top ranked schools, I'd say that's the top 15, maybe top 20 schools in the world. Generally, yeah, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, INSEAD, LBS, they don't have problems getting applications. They're more concerned about managing the reputation of their programs and promoting the culture of their program by getting out in front of people, by bringing students and alumni to these events. They can really give applicants a taste of what the culture and people at these programs are like. And of course, all the other schools do this too, but I'd say that for the rest of the business schools, say outside the top 15, top 20, they're really more concerned about hard recruiting. You know, how many leads can we get? how many leads can we convert into interested, qualified applicants? And then how many of those can we convert into applications? It's a much more hard recruiting effort compared to those top 15 schools. I think you can keep this in mind when you're at these events. My school, when I was the MBA admissions director, was outside the top 20. We weren't ranked. In fact, we were a new MBA program. Our school was very well known within Singapore, but not very well known outside of Singapore. So I definitely fell into that second category of everyone else. So what was I looking for at these MBA fairs? I was looking for qualified candidates. And to me, qualified candidates meant two things. One, that they could potentially be admitted to the school, right? So they were qualified academically, employability-wise. Second, I was looking for someone who had real genuine interest in the program, right? So that was the ideal candidate. If someone was both qualified and interested in the school, I would definitely want to get that person's contact information to follow up with them, right? I definitely want to keep in touch. And I think for most business schools, they're looking for the same types of candidates at MBA fairs and information sessions. Obviously, at information sessions, they're already coming to your event for just your school. So at information sessions, you're really more trying to get applicants pumped about your program. You're trying to bring in your best professors, your best students and alumni to basically show them off and get people super pumped about your MBA program. Personal consultations, one-on-one consultations, I acted more as a trusted advisor. Of course, I wanted to sell my school when I had the opportunity, but it was really about showing how our school could help further along the goals of that applicant. And then the final decision is theirs. I want an applicant who's excited to come to our school. And email was pretty much the same thing. Okay, so I just wanted to first share kind of my personal experience and what I was looking for at these events, so you have an idea of what other business school admissions officers are thinking at these events. In terms of the scope of this episode, I just want to make it focused on the recruiting process, right? So I'm not talking about interacting with admissions after you've gotten into a program or if you're on a wait list. That's a whole different topic. So I want to cover three things. Number one, your mindset. Number two, your preparation. And number three, the actual interaction. So let's start with first the mindset. The first thing you have to do is see the admissions officer as a trusted advisor. This should be your mindset. Don't see the admissions officer as someone who is judging you, but rather see them as a trusted advisor who can help you make an important career decision. This should help you strike the right tone, confident and purposeful, yet respectful of the admission officer's knowledge and position. I think so many of the fears or questions or worries that come with interacting with admissions officers are really about what tone you strike, what tone you take when you interact with them. And I think seeing that person as a trusted advisor helps you strike that right tone, that right energy level. The most important thing of which is, how can someone be a trusted advisor if you're not sure what direction you're headed, right? So we'll get to that in point 2 in your preparation. But in terms of the tone, always be polite, okay? Never talk down to any admission staff in any interaction, whether that's over the phone, over email, at a fair. Let me give you one example. So I used to be the MBA admissions director. I used to have one staff member who was helping me with the recruiting as well. And she sat right in front of me, and she was in charge of, answering any phone inquiries we had, or she was kind of like the first point of contact with any inquiries we had over email or phone. And I could hear her when someone was very respectful, asked good questions, was very polite in dealing with her. I could hear the tone of her voice pick up on the phone, and she would be super helpful with these people. It was the complete opposite the other way. If someone was really rude or disrespectful or basically just bossing her around or hounding her for something, I could hear just the tone of her voice drop. I could hear the irritation in her voice. And oftentimes, if the person was quite bad, quite negative, she would tell me. She would tell me about them. She'd just turn around and tell me and say, gosh, this applicant, we got to really look out for him or her. Like, this person's basically a jerk. And she would often make notes in files as well, right? So I bring up this example so you know that admissions teams talk to each other. They work closely together. And if their interaction with you is very positive or very negative, they're likely to make a note in your file, or at the very least, a mental note. So treat everyone with respect, no matter if they're the dean of the business school to, an admissions assistant. This should be obvious, but it's worth saying again. If a candidate is extraordinarily polite to admissions directors but disrespectful to program assistants, his character will be questioned, right? And really, we'll think, if this applicant is so rude to us right now, what are they going to be like when they're a student, when they're a paying customer, when they're a student at the school? They're going to be a disaster to deal with, right? So you want to always be respectful in your interactions with admissions staff. And in terms of energy level that you take when you're approaching them in person or on the phone, I think it's always good to come in at an energy level slightly above the energy level of the admissions officer, right? So you don't want to be like too high energy. Hey, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about your school, blah. Like you'll maybe scare the admissions officer a little bit, but you also don't want to be too low energy. Can you tell me about your school offerings? You don't want to be too low energy as well, because that shows that maybe you're not that interested in the school. So I think coming in at an energy level right above the person you're interacting with is a good idea as well. So that's first your mindset. Now let's talk about number 2, your preparation. So again, you're seeing the admissions officer as a trusted advisor, and they're most useful as a trusted advisor if you know what you want, right? If you know what direction you're headed and why you're headed that way, and you've done some research into how the school can help you, but you want to know more. So that's essentially the preparation you need. I think it's really useful, for example, if you prepare 3 reasons why you want to attend the school. Prepare 3 thoughtful questions that are related to your career goals that are not easily answered by the website, right? I think that's the best preparation you can have. If an applicant comes to an MBA fair and knows what direction they're headed, what their developmental needs are, and has already done some research on what aspects of the program seem to fit those developmental needs, seem to fit those career goals, I'm really excited to talk to that person, right? Because it already shows their preparation, and it shows that they're already somewhat aligned with our school and somewhat aligned with what we offer. So my ears are really going to perk up when I get a question from this type of candidate. So I just wanted to read some quotes from admissions directors. Don't waste your time asking questions that you could go online and find in a minute. Ask a question that was inspired by something you read online. That way you stand out as someone who is more thoughtful. That was from a UNC Keenan Flagler admissions director. From another admissions director, he said, those applicants who really make the evening come alive are the candidates who have done enough research about the school, are intrigued by some of the unique aspects of the program, and have come to the event wanting to know much more. To them, the event is an excellent opportunity to do further research, an avenue to make connections with fellow applicants, as well as the admissions officer and the alumni in attendance. Yeah, I personally feel like the best questions are career-related questions, because by their very nature, they're very personal. They force you to go to the website and really research in depth about, whether the program can help further those career goals. So I think these are always good questions to ask. Now, in terms of the actual interaction and meeting, I think the first thing you can do is form a bridge. Find a common ground in your introduction. If you have a friend or colleague who is a student or alumni of the program, mention her, unless she's a horrible student, of course. Or maybe you visited the school, or you've been to the school's city or country, then you can mention that. Or maybe you can find something else in common with the admissions officer, whether it's a hometown, an interest, a cause, something to bridge that gap. We like people who are like us, so if you can find that common ground, that's going to pique the interest of the admissions officer. And I personally think the best way to do this is to mention a student or alumni. That always got me to stand up and really take notice of the applicant. Okay, so after you form that bridge, you form that common ground, try to genuinely connect with the admissions officer as a person first. Even if you only have a few seconds of time, a smile or friendly greeting goes a long way. Don't just barge straight into your question. Form that personal connection first with your eyes, with your smile. Maybe you're listening to other applicant questions who were interacting with the admissions officer before your turn. Use those questions as a bridge. Show that you are listening. Show that you can actually connect with this person, first. Then you can ask your question. And so instead of asking a question like, what entrepreneurship classes do you have? Right? That's a question that can be easily answered by a simple web search. A more effective introduction would be, let's say that I'm meeting the UC Berkeley Haas admissions director, and she's in Singapore where I'm working. This would be an introduction I'd use. Something like, hi, my name is Darren, and I'm actually from Thousand Oaks, California, but I've been working out here in Singapore. I've been following Haas for a long time because of its strength in entrepreneurship. And specifically, I'm a huge fan of Professor Steve Blank and his work in customer development. His books have really helped me get my business off the ground and figure out who my customers are. Is it easy to get a seat in his elective class? Because I'm really interested in taking his classes. So that way you've warmed up the conversation, right? You've formed a common bond. In this case, I'm saying I'm from California as well, right? So I'm familiar with Berkeley. And then I have done my research into, which courses I'm most interested in. Professor Steve Blank's, I've actually read 2 of his books, and I would love to take his class. And so I'm asking about, can I get in? So this is a very specific question that's focused on my career goals, that shows my interest in the school. That's going to be a much stronger question than, how can your program help me be a better entrepreneur? So I hope that example is helpful. I also want to cover a couple don'ts. 2 questions you don't want to ask at an MBA fair or an MBA information session is, what are my chances of getting in? And what are my chances of getting a scholarship? Let's start with the second one. What are my chances of getting a scholarship? That's an infuriating question for me when I was an admissions director, because how do you have the gall to ask that when you haven't even applied to our program, you haven't even gotten into our program, and you're already asking about scholarship funding? It's different if you ask about what scholarships are available, but to ask me a question like, what are my chances of getting a scholarship? I found that a very arrogant question, even if the applicant was extremely well qualified and say my school was unranked, not as well known as some of the other schools. I still found that a bit off-putting of a question because it's a bit presumptuous. You haven't even gotten in and you're asking about scholarships. The first question, what are my chances of getting in? It's really hard to answer that question at an MBA fair or at an MBA information session. I mean, we haven't seen your entire application. How can we assess your chances, based on a 1-minute conversation? I don't think that's fair. I think a better approach if you're an applicant is, to ask qualified questions, so show your direction, and then you'll be able to see whether the admissions officer is interested in keeping in touch. Sometimes they'll ask for your contact information, or, they'll make a note about you. That's always a good sign. That's a much better way of gauging their interest than asking them, what are my chances of getting in? That's basically an impossible question to answer for most admissions staff at these events. The last thing is you don't want to hound your admissions officers. So let me give you an example. This is from a Tuck Senior Associate Director. This is what she wrote. She said, "Please do not ask me for 1 alumni contact and then ask for 5 more. Obtaining the first contact and then running with it shows focus and independence in the application process. I will be thrilled to hear of your progress, but I will feel hounded if your email is always something for my to-do list." And I ended it there intentionally. I think that's a great way of putting it. Yes, admissions officers are here to help you. They're there to help you understand whether the school is a good fit or not. They want to help you. But if every interaction you have with them feels like they have to do something for you and it just never stops, that's going to be really tiring for them. And that's going to be a bad association for them, right? So I would say, ask your best questions, be respectful, view them as a trusted advisor, and do as much work as you can on your own, talking to students, talking to alumni, in addition to your questions to the admissions officer. Don't hound them, in other words. And I think you all know what that means. It's obviously unique to each context, to each business school, and to each person you're dealing with, but just don't hound admissions officers. I hope you found this episode helpful, again, to have that right mindset, to view admissions officers as trusted advisors, to do the prep work before you attend the events, know your direction, know your developmental needs, go to the websites of the schools you're interested in and research, what they already have so that you can come with even more in-depth questions. And then with your interaction, again, connect with them personally, form the bridge, and then ask your thoughtful questions that you've already prepared. If you Google Touch MBA interacting with admissions officers, you can find the show notes to this episode. And in the show notes, I'll post something I wrote about interacting with admissions officers to applicants in Vietnam. You can also find show notes and links to posts I found particularly helpful. For example, Vince Prep has a great post on how to impress MBA admissions officers during your campus visit. I also have a link to post of great questions to ask admissions officers from one of our former listeners. Okay, so again, just Google Touch MBA interacting with admissions officers, and you'll find the show notes to this episode. I hope this helps you have some great and fruitful discussions with admissions officers at your target schools. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.